Why the hell aren't there any Terran flags on those launchers? Commander Seth Colrath slammed his hand against the rusted command rail, staring at the silent live feed of Earth's orbital layers. We look like we already... Across the room, the technician flinched, not from the shout, but from the tremor that followed. Dust trickled from the concrete seams of the underground bunker as a low-frequency pressure ripple rolled through the ancient foundation. Somewhere up top, something had just entered Earth's upper atmosphere. Without clearance. In the corner of the chamber, an old siren flickered. No sound. Its audio line had been fried decades ago during a test burn of fusion drives overhead, but it blinked. A low amber glow bouncing off the walls, like a heartbeat skipping every few seconds. Colrath didn't look at it. His eyes stayed locked on the wide, cracked screen above, where 100 orbital vectors intersected across a single curved grid. No Terran ships moved among them, only shadows, foreign, mathematical, impossibly synchronized, forming an arc over the planet, like teeth closing in on a stone. The room smelled of burnt polycables and old paper. Air circulation grates whispered dry heat into the chamber. No one spoke. Not the adjutant reviewing intake logs, not the 3 operatives gathered near the launch trajectory table. Even the young comms officer, fingers shaking as he typed, didn't breathe too loud. Then the display blinked. Static flashed. A channel override. The screen snapped to a high-cast transmission from a Vulcar flagship. The image was sharp, aggressive in clarity. A smooth-skinned being stood over an obsidian deck, clad in regalia too angular for comfort. Behind him, officers in rigid armor faced forward, like statues in a vault. "My designation is Warlord Draven of the Volokar Empire," the alien began, his tone flat, not devoid of emotion but empty of doubt. "You will surrender your lithium repositories for extraction. Any resistance will be categorized as planetary waste." Colrath's lip curled. "That's not a threat. That's bookkeeping." Draven continued, unbothered. "Earth is unranked. It bears no fleet registry, no unified command authority. We have calculated your atmospheric layers can be neutralized within 14 Earth Standard minutes. You may reply with surrender coordinates now." Then the image cut. A sharp tone stabbed through the silence like a dropped scalpel. Colrath turned, stepping down from the control deck, boots scraping against the steel floor. He walked toward the center table, where the remaining operatives stood, a weathered intelligence lead with a retinal scar, a civilian tech analyst in mechanics overalls, and a strategist who looked like he hadn't slept since last quarter rotation. "Where's the council?" Colrath asked. The strategist looked up. "Fragmented, sealed in regional bunkers. Some don't believe it's real yet, some are asking what we're supposed to give them to leave." "What do we have to give them?" Colrath asked flatly. The intelligence lead snorted. "The only thing Earth has plenty of, argument." The young comms officer finally spoke, voice thin but clear. "Sir, the blockade's tightened. Volokar ships have cut 3 geosynchronous relays. Low orbits blind on the eastern hemisphere. Trade routes are frozen, and the orbital elevators just ceased function. We're isolated." Colrath nodded once. "Then we're out of time." He motioned them to follow and move toward the deeper corridor, past thick steel doors marked with dust-covered hazard signs, down into a hall illuminated only by emergency strips embedded into the concrete. The lights cast long shadows against the narrow walls. Far down, a final door waited, sealed not by electronic code, but by a rusted manual crank. Colrath gripped it and turned with both hands, his shoulders strained. The groan of the latch grinding open echoed through the corridor like bones dragged across stone. Behind the door, the L9 tactical vault opened, revealing a small chamber lined with analog consoles, boxes of old data cores, and a wall-sized display with a single active feed still running from a dormant orbital platform. He gestured toward it. "This is what's left, a fleet of prototypes, civilian-built, Decommissioned skunkworks, hulls patched with mining rig plates and old solar arrays. They never made it to registry. The tech analyst stepped forward, eyes wide. These aren't warships. Colrath looked at him. They're ghosts. Firebrands. They weren't built to fight. They were built because some people refused to wait for permission. The strategist frowned. Are they even space-worthy? Some are. Colrath leaned over the nearest console, wiping away a layer of dust, revealing the control schematic for an orbital testbed rig codenamed Tether 1. Enough to light a match. Above ground, the world shifted, not with sound, but with absence. The elevators froze. Ports ceased hailing frequencies. Civilian satellites drifted without alignment correction. Earth's orbital sky filled with Volokar shapes that glinted in low sunlight like polished blades, hanging above a silent crowd. And the people noticed. From the rooftops of Karachi to the fire-escaped ladders in New York, from the crater-shelled domes of Lhasa to the ice-patched rooftops of Baffin terminals, humans stared upward, not because they saw ships, but because they saw the stars vanish behind perfect formation. Every line, every edge, every rotating segment of the Volokar fleet blocked the constellations they'd grown up naming. The sky was no longer theirs. In the ruins of the L9 bunker, Colrath stood before a cracked mirror bolted beside the exit. He stared at his reflection, a man whose lungs had nearly collapsed in lunar dust, whose ribs carried scars from previous collapses, whose eyes didn't blink anymore when engines failed mid-dive. "We don't have a flag up there," he said quietly. The intelligence lead glanced over. "No, we never did." Colrath's jaw tightened. "Then, it's time we sent something else." Outside, the light shifted again, not from the sun, but from the flicker of space elevators powering down, their steel trunks grinding to a halt as systems failed under lockdown. The towers stood still, like bones without flesh, waiting for a signal that would never come from above, and deep underground, behind layers of concrete and forgotten authority, one voice crackled to life through an old relay frequency. "Commander Colrath, clearance granted. Reignite the yard." He didn't smile. He turned to the console, fingers moving fast, activating dormant links, booting systems stitched together with parts no one remembered naming. "Then let's build the sky," he whispered. "From wreckage, if we have to." Colrath's boots struck the grated floor of Dock 17 with clipped, heavy steps. Every stride timed to the rhythm of hydraulic lifters slamming into place across the hangar's shadowed interior. Fluorescent strips buzzed in irregular pulses above, barely holding their charge as arc welders sparked behind a sealed blast curtain. Somewhere deeper in the structure, metal screamed as it was bent back into shape with handheld presses. This was not a fleet yard. It was a scrapyard waking up. A young man in grease-covered boots met him at the gantry, eyes sunken from fatigue. He held a datapad covered in manual override codes and etched frame schematics. The edge of his jaw twitched when Colrath arrived. "You Colrath?" he asked. "No." "The comparison notice and its future." "No, I'm your eviction notice." The commander muttered, brushing past. "No, I'm your eviction notice." "The comparison notice, I am your eviction notice." "Olivia, R3. Your name, Olivia." They walked in silence beneath scaffolded arcs of disassembled haulers, once used to tow asteroid clusters through the belt, now stripped, chopped, and patched with black market alloys. Through cracked observation panels, Colrath saw dozens of makeshift hulls floating in the dry dock reservoir, jagged, misshapen, painted over again and again in matte deck sealant to scatter sensor returns. Bryn Hauser waited at the control station. His beard was streaked with oil, and a coil of fiber cable rested over his shoulders like a scarf. He didn't salute. "They're ugly," he said. "But so were the mongrels that survived every plague." Colrath stepped up to the railing. I'm not here to judge beauty contests. I need them in orbit within 72 hours. Hauser's eyes narrowed. You think these things are warships? We pulled half of them from failed deorbit clusters. One of them still has a refrigeration stamp from Titan. Kolrath turned to face him directly. You ever fly evac during the siege of Charon? No, Hauser replied. I did. In a shuttle half this size with duct tape holding the cabin seal. We lost 15 men mid-drop, and we still landed. You give me a shell and a steering vector, I'll make it bite. Hauser stared for a long moment, then nodded once toward the corner of the bay. Then talked to Sarnak. He builds the bite. Del Sarnak was already elbow-deep inside the frame of a stealth glider when Kolrath found him, arms gloved to the shoulder in coolant paste, knees braced on a vibro-grip platform while sparks flared around his face mask. You Kolrath? He asked without turning. I'm not a fan of introductions, the commander replied. I heard you know how to make a hull disappear. I make the hulls scream when you want 'em quiet, and whisper when you want 'em loud. He slid out from under the glider with a wrench the length of his forearm. Stealth plating's trash in the real world. What you want is light bending, signal drift, and something that doesn't move like a damn bird. You can have your whole crew taken to command. Full access. Sarnak's face remained expressionless. We don't leave the yard. If we move, the eyes follow. The probes think this place is a grave. And we like it that way. Kolrath leaned in. Then you'll stay ghosts, but your ghosts now serve a war. They shook once. Oily glove to calloused palm. Later that night, deep beneath the orbital yard, Kolrath descended into the wire nest of the communications tunnel. The air was thick with coolant exhaust and solder smoke. He stepped over bundles of stripped cabling and old neural routers to reach the underground signal cage where civilian hacker teams had set up temporary command nodes. Lines of code danced across outdated holo displays. Wires ran like spiderwebs into processor clusters cooled with hand-built fans made from drone rotors. Every sound echoed, keyboard taps, breathing, the clack of metal tools on concrete. A young tech named Vorin stood when Kolrath entered. Thin, barely 20, skin pale from too many hours underground. We've started feeding the probes false returns, he said, gesturing toward a map flickering on the wall behind him. Volokar sensor buoys now show thermal shadows of ships in sectors we don't occupy. Kolrath stepped forward, scanning the overlay. How long until they question the data? Not soon. The Volokar rotate scouts on an 8-hour loop. As long as our decoy pulses mimic maneuver trails, they'll think we're repositioning actual assets. You're using temperature drift from refinery waste, Kolrath guessed. Vorin's eyes widened slightly. Exactly. You're smarter than you look. Thank you, sir. I look like a corpse. Kolrath allowed a hint of a smirk, then turned to the others in the room. You're not soldiers. That's good. Soldiers follow doctrine. You follow ghosts. From now on, every lie you feed their system keeps a real man alive up top. When he returned to the hangar, the first test platform was already being towed into orbit. The tethered craft lifted on magnetic impulse rails, rising silently above the dock floor as its prototype panels shimmered like oil across broken glass. No name, no beacon, no signal. Just form. Hauser stood beside him again. This time, he didn't speak. Kolrath folded his arms. You ever see a lion before it leaps? Hauser didn't answer. Kolrath raised his voice to address the entire yard crew. Engineers stopped welding. Pilot trainees turned from their simulators. Every technician, mechanic, and ex-freighter driver paused mid-motion to listen. You weren't built for war, he said. But neither was freedom. What matters now isn't your past, it's your direction. No more counsels, no more warnings. You are now the thing they forgot to check for. You are the thing they can't afford to underestimate. A low ripple of motion spread through the crowd. Not applause. Just readiness. Above them, The prototype reached low orbit. The cameras cut in and out as its stealth array modulated its signature. Then, it vanished entirely from radar and infrared. Sarnak's voice came through the control line from the flight console. "Tracking confirms negative beacon. It's off-grid." Kolrath stepped closer to the screen. "Keep it there." He turned to Hauser and the rest of the gathered engineers. "Now, multiply that by 50. The black site yard erupted into motion again. Scaffolds moved, cutters flared, fuel lines hissed with pressure. The air thickened with fumes and grit. Kolrath walked through it, boots heavy with weld dust and scorched polymer. His back ached, his jaw clenched, but his eyes never left the empty grid where the prototype had vanished. Because sometimes a fleet didn't need to be seen. It just needed to be there. Kolrath leaned forward in the cockpit of the strike rig, his gloved hands tightening around the control sticks as orbital vectors lined up across the side display. His jaw clenched as static popped in his headset, coded bursts from teams scattered across the black. "Confirm thermal drift over Vector Delta 7. Are you in position?" From the other end, Bryn Hauser's voice returned, low and urgent. "We're 5 clicks off the relay spine. Sarnak's modifying the coolant burst now. Should look like a garbage drone dump." "Stick to the window," Kolrath replied. "We've only got one." Below them, the earth curved like a bruised knuckle beneath the ship's hull. Shadows stretched long over the Pacific Ridge, and above, the blockade lines shimmered like spears pointed downward. Rows of Volokar pylons locking down all entry and exit lanes to Earth's orbit. Kolrath's fleet wasn't built to contest power. It was built to erode it. He triggered the rig's lateral boosters, the frame rattling as the patchwork vessel tucked into a blind band between relay satellites. The blackened hull bled heat slowly, blending with surrounding orbital debris. 3 smaller ships followed, maneuvering like vultures circling a feast they'd already claimed. Ahead, a Volokar logistics platform loomed. Its docking ring anchored to a refueling line that extended from a tethered freighter. A fuel pod rotated slowly, exposed during transfer. Vulnerable. Kolrath opened a private line. "Target ship. Designation Lavok 887. Inject phase begins in 40 seconds." Aboard the lead stealth rig, Sarnak's team aligned magnetic hooks beneath the freighter's exposed joint. No alarms, no countermeasures. They weren't expected. Then a quiet click filtered through the channel as magnetic clamps locked into place. Sarnak's voice came calm. "Charge inserted. Reactor junction will boil off in 90 seconds. Kolrath counted down from 30. On cue, the team detached and drifted backward into thermal shadow. The charge lit beneath the vessel's skin. A small flash, then a rising surge of energy that cooked the reactor chamber before the Volokar could detect internal fault. The fuel line ruptured. Fire surged outward like a liquid blade, slicing the support tether and hurling the transport backward. The shock wave cracked the platform's midsection, scattering debris across the docking bay. Kolrath watched it unfold in total silence. That's one less delivery. Hours later, in Earth's low-orbit scrapyard belt, civilian resistance teams gathered around signal repeaters, built into hollowed transport husks. They worked in pairs, one soldering data taps onto drone navigation relays, the other scrambling Volokar beacon frequencies, by cross-feeding power loops through scavenged sensor coils. None wore uniforms. They dressed in patchwork pressure suits, coats over old work harnesses, boots caked in dust from abandoned launch yards. One of the saboteurs, an old miner named Kezran, cut the final power conduit to a Volokar surveillance tower embedded on the side of an abandoned orbital pylon. The moment the wire snapped, the lights inside the tower flickered. He motioned to his partner, and together they fed a timed feedback surge into the relay. The pylon glowed once, then darkness. The signal died. Earth's low orbit had grown teeth. Meanwhile, within the Volokar flagship Draxian Spire, strategist Horkel Vel stood before a command grid, glowing with red overlays. He tapped the display again, highlighting anomalies in convoy reports. Staggered delivery times, repeat losses near relay corridors, malfunctioning fuel cores. Drone relays showing false trajectories. He turned to the senior commander flanking him. "These are not isolated errors," Vel said. "Our surveillance probes continue to report fluctuations in energy dispersion across what should be static orbits. Sensor drift does not account for missing cargo or lost tower feeds." The commander didn't look up. "The Terrans are lashing out, desperate flailing. We've seen this before on Uveron Prime. Their strikes are meaningless." Vel's voice dropped. "We saw chaos on Uveron. Not patterns. This," he motioned to the grid, "is sequence." The commander exhaled. "Are you suggesting coordination?" "I'm saying our logistics are being unraveled." The commander turned his head slowly. "Watch your posture, strategist. There's no war fleet here, no command flag. Earth is fractured." Vel didn't respond. His gaze returned to the blinking grid. One by one, the lights blinked off. Back on Earth, Kolrath sat in a makeshift operations chamber built into the side of a decommissioned sky crane, its panels reinforced with field armor. He watched a wall of data streams flow from ground-level strikes. Generator arrays overloaded, relay towers jammed, Volokar guard posts isolated without signal recovery. "We're bleeding them," Hauser said from across the table. "Not fast, not loud, but the lines are breaking." Kolrath nodded. "That's the point. Every time they realign their transports, we cut again. Hit the transit corridor, then drift. Hit their towers, then vanish." Sarnak tossed a set of thermal masks onto the deck. "They think we're scavengers with torches. Let them. They'll keep walking into punches they don't see coming." Kolrath looked around the room. Men who had once fixed broken ships, now breaking an empire one wire at a time. "Do we have eyes on their cargo holds?" Hauser pulled up a feed from a hacked Volokar manifest relay. "They've got another lithium freighter prepping departure over Sector Epsilon. We'll need 3 teams. Make it 2. Overlap our approach using scrubbed trails. We make it look like internal malfunction again." Hauser frowned. "We're cutting it thin. Every loss tightens their guard." Kolrath's voice didn't rise. "Tight guards miss what they assume isn't there." 2 hours later, above Earth's dusk line, a Volokar freighter descended under fire suppression lockdown. Its outer hull flickered as emergency plating failed to contain an internal flash event. The sky turned pale orange across 6 continents as the re-entry flare lit the atmosphere. On the surface, people paused. In Nairobi's outer districts, children pointed skyward. In Buenos Aires, a retired engineer wept quietly. In Vladivostok, 2 students dropped their radio schematics and ran onto a rooftop just to watch. For the first time since the blockade, the sky offered something besides silence. Above them, a warship burned, not human, not claimed, but falling. And for once, Earth had done the pushing. The bunker doors hissed shut behind Kolrath as he descended the final corridor. This one smelled different. No oil, no scorched cables, no recycled heat. Just filtered sterility, the kind that made you distrust the silence. Beyond the reinforced archway, lights strobed red along the perimeter of the dark space chamber. A security analyst handed him a clearance tablet, gaze avoiding the far corner. Kolrath followed it anyway. 3 Tarnak stood inside the quarantine cage. Thin and tall, skin ridged in segments like armor plates, except theirs had been scarred, twisted by years of forced servitude. Their eyes didn't blink in sync, and their mouths didn't move when they spoke. Instead, they used voice sync collars that buzzed softly with tonal overlays as translators caught up. One wore shackles still partially fused into his wrists. Another had the symbol of a Volokar vassal burned into the left side of his neck. Kolrath didn't sit. He didn't offer a welcome. He walked to the edge of the cage and waited. The Tarnak with the branding raised his head. "We bring coordinates, you bring outcome." Kolrath nodded once. "Show me the outcome." The Tarnak pressed a palm to the surface of the cage. A wave of static rippled outward as the embedded processor within their skin core transferred data into the room's collection node. No wireless connection, hardline only. The screen blinked twice and then filled with a schematic that shouldn't have existed. Kolrath narrowed his eyes. "Dominus?" The Tarnak responded through the collar. "The flagship. The Empire's thought engine. Everything passes through one mind. One machine." Another Tarnak added, "They simplified command structure after Velkar siege. Fewer moving parts. Faster conquest." Kolrath leaned forward, studying the layout. "They didn't build it for endurance, they built it for volume." The collar buzzed again. "Correct, the neural quantum core links all formations through relay bursts, but no redundancy. Not for fear of fracture. They trust direction over reaction." Kolrath didn't speak again. He turned, left the chamber, and took the lift down to the data crypt beneath Earth's southern relay site. There, in a floodlit server hall cooled by Arctic air intake, Galen Price sat cross-legged beside 3 stacked processors. Wires trailed from his headset, snaking around his arms like vines. Old code manuals lay open beside him, annotated by hand, marked with tape, tagged with warning slips in 5 languages. Kolrath stepped into the light. Price didn't glance up. "You're late," he said. "I don't wear watches anymore." Price chuckled without amusement. "You didn't come down here to banter. You've got something." Kolrath dropped the encrypted slate onto the floor beside him. The file blinked once before the processor began parsing it. "You're looking at the Dominus core," Kolrath said. "It's singular, no shadow node, no backup relay, everything branches from that mind." Price paused, then slowly peeled off his headset. "They centralized the entire fleet's decision-making into one grid?" Kolrath nodded. "Built for speed, built for offense. They never expected counter-command." Price exhaled. "That's idiotic. That's exploitable." Price leaned in, eyes already scanning the logic flow. "The quantum framework's embedded with dual-wave processors. I'll need to spoof its confirmation pulse or we risk triggering a burn sequence on upload." "You can do it?" "I can break it," Price said, fingers already dancing over the manual keypads. "But I need real-time architecture. Their system refreshes node connections every cycle. I need the anchor signal before injection. Then you'll get it. We'll tag the relay through the stealth pod. You'll have a 90-second breach window." Price looked up at him. "You understand what this means, don't you? If I pull this off, they lose control of formation hierarchy. Fire sequences get misrouted. Navigation offsets will trigger engine compensation. They'll eat their own coordination." Kolrath's tone didn't shift. "That's the point." Over the next 16 hours, a cold war of bytes erupted beneath Earth's crust. Price worked without pause, layers of insulated coffee cups stacking around him as his fingers crawled through Volokar code like a surgeon rerouting blood vessels under fire. Behind him, 3 secondary analysts mapped root trees while data forgers mimicked Volokar syntax pulses using captured telemetry files. In the northern corridor of the relay center, Kolrath reviewed assault routes with Hauser. The insertion pod would launch from shadow orbit, masked by a decaying freighter wreckage that floated beyond the automated scan sweep. The upload team would have 6 minutes to reach the broadcast line. 2 men. No support. Sarnak entered halfway through the strategy brief, wiping grease from his forearms. "I've got a rig for you, scrub signal signature, vector dampers, adaptive flare arrays. It won't show up unless someone manually spots it from inside their ship." "You trust it?" Kolrath asked. "I built it." Kolrath stared at him. "So... no." Sarnak laughed. "Fair?" Later that night, as the stealth pod was wheeled onto the launch rack, the final upload script was sealed into a compression core and slotted into its delivery shell. The team stepped up, a technician named Rel and a slicer named Joran. Both were quiet, both had served during the blackout drills in the Jovian tunnels. Both had volunteered. Kolrath met them outside the bay. "You're not being remembered for bravery. You're being remembered for what happens after." Rel nodded once. "I'll settle for them not remembering how they lost at all." As the launch timer hit 0, the pod detached from the rack, sliding into the orbit line behind a cloud of rotating debris. Cold radiation panels folded back into its structure as it slipped beyond line of sight, its vector aligned perfectly with the Dominus satellite grid. Inside the cockpit, Joran tapped the upload switch. The slate came online. Lines of code began streaming into the Volokar backbone. Slowly, steadily, hidden beneath diagnostic ping signals. Joram whispered under his breath as the feed engaged. No command, no direction, no empire. Behind him, Rel kept one eye on the sync rate. Behind Earth, a shadow formation blinked once, then twice. Lights flickering out of sequence. The signal was working, and the countdown had begun. Kolrath crouched inside the lead stealth rig, visor flickering as real-time telemetry crawled across the side panel. The pod's interior was packed wall to wall, crew breathing slow through tight-fit helmets. Every surface lined with heat-diffusing mesh. Outside the viewport, debris rotated through the black-burned antenna spires, insulation scraps, fractured plates from long-dead satellites. Earth's graveyard had become its armor. Rel's voice came through first, brittle with tension. Upload completed. Latencies started to spike across their forward channel. Kolrath responded without lifting his head. "Pull the pod back into drift. Start sweeping formation movement on the North Arc. Look for signs of signal bleed." The rig hissed forward under pulse thruster bursts, so small they wouldn't register to orbital scans. Around him, 3 other crafts followed, welded from the bones of forgotten cargo haulers, refitted with visual scatter fields and rerouted flare ports. Every ship moved on instinct, tucked beneath the radar horizon, hugging debris shadows that looped between the Dominus network arms. Inside the command tower of the Dominus itself, a Volokar tactician named Urik Tal watched the hologrid blink. One icon flickered, then another. Tactical feeds began mislabeling friendly vessels. Confirmation echoes began bouncing, delayed, distorted. A targeting alignment request arrived for an outer patrol cruiser, but the coordinates referenced the ship's own tail signature. Tal narrowed his eyes. He tapped the command buffer again. Nothing responded. "Command relay is reporting mismatch error," a deck engineer said, voice trembling. "Fleet subnetworks are misaligning orbital positions." Tal turned to the operator. "Shut down reroute channels. Reset tactical buffer." "They're already resetting. It's not accepting the override." One floor beneath them, a secondary weapons officer glanced up from his console. "Autocannons on patrol bracket 7-3 just engaged." "On what?" Tal barked. "On internal ID markers." Inside Earth's strike rig, Kolrath watched the data feed turn chaotic. Volokar formations scattering, guidance lines collapsing into unreadable spirals. 3 of their heavy cruisers began drifting laterally into each other, maneuvering as though each had received exclusive flight vectors. Galen Price's voice slid into the channel with flat satisfaction. "The processor's losing track of logic loops. It's redirecting response commands without anchor. They can't tell who's responding to what." Kolrath leaned into the mic. "Then we strike now. Pick the limbs clean while they flail." Hauser's craft flared to life beneath a dead orbital radar relay, slipping out from behind the debris. His weapon grid flared. Makeshift plasma lances bolted to repurposed tug rails, ripping across the side of a drifting Volokar escort vessel. The enemy ship jerked, tried to counter-thrust, but another Volokar frigate slammed into its side, reacting to a phantom threat. Kolrath's rig rolled beneath a sensor node, fired upward, and cut through the exposed guidance wing of a command shuttle. The engine burst, lit the arc above the Dominus in firelight. Sarnax's strike team emerged next. They arced low across the debris plain, launching 3 kinetic bursts that detonated silently on impact, shredding the orbital relay between the Dominus and its logistics array. From above it looked like Earth's fleet had split into dozens, ghost trails lacing the orbital zone. Every burst of fire staggered and unpatterned. Volokar defense systems flailed in response, overcorrecting, engaging false signatures, colliding with allies, and even turning internal weapons back toward fleet shadows that didn't exist. Inside the Dominus control deck, Tal shouted over rising comms distortion. "Full system halt. Initiate autonomous disengagement." One operator screamed, "It's not responding. Internal fire controls locked into misfire sequence." Another shrieked, "Tactical grids showing our own transport as a hostile. We're targeting ourselves." A Volokar captain slammed both fists into the console. "Where is this input coming from?" No one answered. By the time Dominus attempted to switch to manual node management, half its fleet had scattered beyond its response zone. Autonomous override commands backfed into ships, now misreading their own allies as attackers. From Earth's ground observation platforms, civilians saw the orbital grid fracture like breaking glass. Fire lines traced curves across the sky. Some arcs blinked, flared, and vanished as command cruisers lost containment. Others pinwheeled, their trajectories wrong, their paths corrupted. Kolrath tracked one enemy frigate as it tried to disengage, only for a patrol ship to veer and clip its flank. The 2 vessels spiraled before detonating against each other, scattering bright shards across the orbital line. "Status?" he called. Hauser's voice came steady. 7 enemy crafts lost, 3 confirmed destroyed, 2 abandoned mid-drift, no active return fire that's coordinated. They're blind. Kolrath tightened his grip on the throttle, then hit them again. Earth's makeshift fleet surged back into shadow, flaring once, then breaking formation to strike again, this time from entirely new vectors, riding blind spots, weaponizing the confusion. Above them, inside the Dominus, Tal gripped a dead channel relay, his voice shaking. "Command to fleet, respond." He repeated the call. Still nothing. "First fleet, command to fleet." The main viewfinder filled with fire from another collision, this one direct. A logistics cruiser, throttling on ghost coordinates, embedded itself into the side of a support hauler. Both ruptured, lit in flickering flame and torn scaffolding. Tal turned from the screen, his voice cracking. "They're dismantling us." No answer came. The bridge lights flickered again. Behind him, operators stared at broken panels and corrupted displays. Every system reported feedback. No response, returned clean. Inside Earth's rig, Kolrath disengaged his weapons grid, looped the craft back into the orbital dust line, and activated the secondary cloak net. "Pull back," he ordered. "Strike windows closing," Hauser replied. "We're not here to win it in one breath. We're here to make them forget how to breathe." And with that, Earth's ships vanished, back into the scrapyard graveyard, leaving behind nothing but wreckage, untraceable vectors, and a sky the Volokar could no longer read. Kolrath stood in the airlock, one hand braced against the side rail as the override lights blinked amber across the hatch seal. His boarding team waited behind him. 4 men clad in pressure armor, faces hidden, weapons stowed until breach. Every breath in the chamber came shallow, recycled, heavy with the scent of suit coolant and welded polymer seams. Across the corridor, the ruptured hull of Dominus loomed. Its portside plating cracked from the previous collision, one side slumped inward like a punctured lung. Sparks flickered through exposed interior beams, casting jittery shadows across the hull breach. Heat radiated in pulses from the tear, rising from the insulation foam curling along the break. Kolrath keyed the channel. "Control, we're moving, keep overwatch. If we don't ping back in 20, reroute Sarnax's rig for fallback intercept." On the other end, Hauser's voice crackled. "Understood. Stay loud. The outer hatch cycled with a harsh clank, and the 5 men jumped the short drift across open space, their boots catching the shredded lip of Dominus's torn deck. Gravity plating flickered beneath their feet, unstable but enough to land. Colrath stepped first into the corridor, rifle raised. The air smelled like burning rubber and overheated coolant. No motion, no sound beyond the groan of stressed hull frames shifting under the weight of internal failures. They moved in silence through the first junction. Lights swung overhead, uncontrolled, some shattered completely. The walls bore scorch marks. Several Volokar lay crumpled in armor, some from decompression, others with wounds too clean to be accidents. Every bulkhead held a different story. Every door might still be sealed for a reason. Primary nodes at the stern, Colrath whispered. No detours, we're not here for trophies. They advanced past a blown-out service chamber, where exposed wiring sparked across the floor like snapping snakes. One of the soldiers, Lyric, climbed the central shaft ladder first, rifle braced against his shoulder. Movement above, he hissed. Colrath nodded, signaled the other two. They fanned left and right, rifles tracking the shadows. 2 Volokar dropped from the side alcove mid-jump, angled blades flashing under the flickering lights. Colrath fired once, clipped the first in the neck, watched it crumple with a twitch of armor. The second slammed into Lyric, knocking his rifle wide. They went down hard. Sparks flew from the wall as the two rolled, fists slamming, boots scraping across the deck. Lyric managed to draw a knife and drove it upward between the alien's torso segments, twisting once before shoving the body off. He staggered to his feet, blood seeping from a cut across his brow. "Still with us?" Colrath asked. Lyric wiped his face with a glove. "Always." They moved faster after that, guns drawn at every cross corridor. Resistance intensified near the command vault. A Volokar fire team had formed a makeshift barrier, 3 braced behind a collapsed stanchion, one controlling a mounted repeater rig jury-rigged into the hallway junction. Colrath threw the breach charge. The blast shook the entire section, overpressure knocking panels loose from the ceiling, light strips crashing to the floor. The human team surged through the breach, rifles blazing. 2 Volokar fell instantly. The third lunged and was met by a short-range burst that flung him into a wall. The final one tried to run, got caught mid-turn, and hit the floor with a gurgle. Inside the command vault, the central processor remained intact. Colrath stepped over the threshold, nodded to Merrick, the tech specialist. Merrick dropped to his knees, pulled the tools from his rig bag, and started bypassing the encryption plate that shielded the drive core. 3 layers, Merrick muttered. Internal defenses still live. If I mess this up, you won't. Colrath cut in. The screen above them flashed. Emergency override triggers danced across the Volokar language fields. An automated voice pulsed overhead, broadcasting in their native tongue. Merrick's hands moved fast, fingers pressing switches in rapid sequence. "Give me another minute." Outside, Hauser's voice broke into the comm. "Volokar ships just aligned. Something's moving fast from the rear. Big. Probably central trigger." Colrath didn't ask what that meant. He turned to his team. "Cover the vault. If they're launching a counterstrike, it starts here." The deck beneath their feet vibrated deep, rhythmic, rising in frequency. Merrick didn't pause. He hissed between clenched teeth, sweat trailing across his jaw. "Got it." The core lifted from the mount. He cradled it like a bomb. "Full command route tree. Everything they use to link ships. It's ours now." Colrath keyed his suit. "Sarnak, we're moving. Ready extraction corridor." "Already clearing the path," came the reply. As they exited, a red strobe flared across the ceiling. Fire suppressants began pouring from the vents. Not gas, not water. Liquid carbon shielding, designed to flood a deck in less than 10 seconds. Colrath shouted, "Run!" They dashed down the hallway, boots slapping against wet tile. One of the soldiers, Garen, slipped mid-turn, caught the side of the bulkhead and pushed himself upright. They hit the outer chamber just as the inner corridor began collapsing behind them, internal support beams detonating in sequence. They crossed back into their boarding rig, sealed the hatch, and launched as the shockwave hit. From orbit, the Dominus began to fracture. First a soft swell, then a sudden eruption. Fire billowed from its core as its support structure failed. 3 secondary detonations followed, lighting the orbital field with arcs of blue-white energy. Several Earth pilots trailing extraction got caught in the blast. Kolrath's screen lit with alert signals. 2 names vanished from the roster. Sarnak's voice cracked into comms. We lost crews on the outer loop. Kolrath stared at the damage, his hands flat on the console. How many? 2 confirmed. 1 rig caught debris mid-burn, the other never cleared. He nodded, jaw locked tight. Back on Earth, in a classified relay site, defectors from the Tarnak resistance sent out the intercepted video of Dominus's destruction across Volakar's civilian grids. The footage was grainy, uncontrolled, but real, showing Earth's fireteam escaping as their flagship disintegrated. The Empire tried to suppress the footage. It didn't work. By the time Volakar diplomats issued denials, the outer colonies were already echoing the broadcast. And above Earth, in the cold mist of broken orbit, Kolrath's fleet aligned. Rigs without markings, scarred hulls drifting behind debris. No victory call, no transmission. Just presence. Kolrath's fleet moved without formation, 1 rig at a time, scattered along the ruined stretch of Earth's low orbit. Their signals remained dark, broadcast ports still disabled, but inside each vessel, the crew watched the same feed. Fractured Volakar ships attempting to regroup. The command deck of Earth's flagship was filled with short-clipped bursts of coordination. No chatter, no ceremony. Hauser adjusted the ECM grid with 1 gloved hand, the other dragging a signal scrambler into a capture field. On his screen, the last Volakar interceptor vessel flickered with false data, reacting to phantom threats while slowly losing orientation. They're scanning us like we're debris, Hauser muttered. Kolrath stood behind him, arms folded, eyes locked on the telemetry feed. Then we keep acting like it. Sink the decoys and bleed the rest. In a low pass over one of the burning carrier husks, Sarnak's rig ignited its secondary jammers. A flicker of static echoed across the enemy's interface, and 3 Volakar pilots abandoned course, jettisoning from their bridge capsule and drifting helplessly into the orbit field. Earth's forces closed in behind, retrofitted grapples and clamps locking onto weakened hulls. By the 3rd hour, 6 enemy vessels had been boarded, 2 seized intact. The command net buzzed with callouts, snatch coordinates, capture tags, asset recovery logs. Every stolen ship was stripped and tagged within 20 minutes, their systems isolated and input fed with scrambled language fields. The humans didn't want their tech. They wanted what it could no longer give back to its owners: control. On the UN cryogrid, the long-dormant Central Council stirred for the first time in weeks. Delegates patched in from sealed subcontinent bunkers, some barely clothed, still wrapped in thermal gear from emergency lockdowns. Their faces appeared in segmented holotiles across the briefing chamber. A diplomat from the Mars station broke protocol first. We have ships in orbit that don't belong to Earth. They do now, Kolrath's voice answered from the bridge stream. Another delegate leaned forward. You've seized orbital control? No, Kolrath replied. We've buried everyone who thought we didn't deserve it. There was no applause, only acknowledgement. Within 6 hours, Earth's global channel pushed a declaration out through the surviving relay rings. Human space zone active. All non-native vessels were to be halted at the outer beacon line. No further entry permitted without broadcast handshake and 3-tier verification. The colonies responded fast. Europa's hydrogrid kicked back online. Titan's ports transmitted reactivation signatures. On Ceres, the last frozen food capsule lifted from the reactor vent and began thawing supply stock. Shuttles flew again, Not sleek, not elegant, patched with emergency welds, engines gutted from drills, but flying. Colrath declined every offer to speak to the press or represent the operation. He left command under Hauser's watch and took a service shuttle to Station 9. It had been silent since the re-entry burns. He stepped onto the cracked platform, suit still dusted with orbital soot, and looked across the broken latticework where Arjun Luth's ship had gone down. No wreckage remained, just scored earth and warp plating buried deep under a black sheet of fused sand. Colrath knelt, his knees pressed into the cold steel, eyes closing. No speech came, just memory. The way Arjun used to lean into every landing, overcorrect every thruster like he was trying to grip space itself. The way he always double-checked fuel lines even after system green. And how he never once said goodbye before an op. Just that half smirk, like he already knew they'd see each other again. They didn't. A technician approached from behind, boots echoing against the shell-plated floor. "Sir, your shuttle's ready." Colrath stood, but his gaze stayed fixed. "This where it happened?" "Yes, sir. Core ignited mid-descent." He probably never saw the impact. Colrath's throat tightened. He saw enough to fly straight into it. The tech nodded. "We'll install the markers tomorrow. Full crew list." As the shuttle rose, the Volokar frontier fractured. In their core system, recordings of Dominus's final moments spread like fire. Defectors leaked internal memos, some detailing contradictions in command logs, others showing frantic dispatches rewritten mid-transmission. Public confidence eroded fast. 3 frontier colonies rejected war subsidies, refusing to pay for what they now saw as strategic failure. 2 lower lords resigned. 1 broadcasted a message over open relay. "If Earth has no fleet, then we should fear the next lie even more." Volokar intelligence divisions tried to spin the defeat as internal sabotage, but no one believed it. Not after so many vessels misfired. Not after whole formations drifted into wreckage. And then the drone arrived. It wasn't large, barely bigger than a mining surveyor, but its trajectory was clean, its signal dead. It glided through the edge of Mars' orbit, passing near a fractured Volokar battlecruiser, the same one that had tried to flee the day Dominus collapsed. The drone drifted once, stabilized, and deployed its only tool, a rotating cutter arm. The process took 17 minutes. No music, no broadcast, no fanfare. Just clean motion, burning a warning into the exposed hull. 6 words. No banner. No name. Just language. "Do not orbit without memory of loss." From Earth, Colrath saw the message 2 hours later. He didn't react, didn't speak. But he looked to the stars and nodded once. Not in celebration, only acknowledgement. Colrath stood beneath the silent curve of Earth's sky, the last shuttle lifting off behind him, engines cutting through wind-blasted cliffs of a remote Antarctic launch site. No one waved. No applause. The workers who had laid the last seal on the lower cryo vaults simply packed up their gear and filed back into the ground. Above, the orbital horizon glowed with scattered lights, not from ships, but from debris formed into arcs, welded together by volunteer engineers from 6 continents. Every segment held a different set of names, hand-etched in steel ripped from wreckage. Freighter plates, battlecruiser flanks, even fractured satellite arrays. No symbols, no flags, just names. Stationed high over Earth, the memorial ring turned slowly, kept in balance by the very drive cores once designed to tear through blockade lines. Colrath walked toward the overlook panel. His joints ached more now. The suit didn't quite fit the way it used to. A light layer of frost coated the visor of his helmet until he wiped it clear. From this angle, the curvature of the orbital ring was just barely visible. Blinking with pulse lights, each programmed to match the biometric signals of those who had died in orbit. A comms officer approached, tablet in hand, boots crunching across the frozen platform. "Sir, we've synchronized the broadcast cycle. Satellite beacons programmed. Final confirmation needed." Kolrath took the tablet, reviewed the line one more time. No flourish, no clever threat. Just the final message. He tapped the confirmation code. A moment later, from orbital repeaters layered across Earth's edge, the cycle began. One broadcast, once every standard cycle. Just 6 words. They were not spoken. They were delivered. Not loud, just undeniable. Across the neutral systems, on far-off trade stations and monitored border colonies, they played automatically, no notification, no announcement. Enter orbit again and you'll learn what we do with warnings. The words arrived in a neutral tone, translated into every known dialect. They appeared on station walls, inside transport consoles, during system boot-ups. Unblockable, unstoppable. On the diplomatic rings near the rim belt, a delegation of junior cadets reviewed the compiled footage of the Earth-Volokar conflict. Their mentor, an older observer from the Valari archives, stood beside the display board. One cadet tilted her head. They had no fleet, no centralized military. How did they win? The mentor didn't answer immediately. He adjusted the recorder, pausing on an image of Earth's debris field. You misunderstand. They didn't win. They buried a fleet with nothing but pieces. Another cadet asked. But what did they build? What's left now? The old man tapped the final image. Kolrath's fleet assembled behind the remains of the Dominus. A memory, one that fires back. At the outer edge of the Volokar home system, protest banners drifted outside the council chambers. Entire satellite districts had shut down. Former logistics officers refused transport assignments. Recruitment queues sat empty. The outer colonies had started tagging their ships with new paint, neutral colors only, no insignia, and nowhere near earthbound lanes. Inside the central chamber, surviving command lords argued about response options, reparations, military reformation, but no decisions reached resolution. Because no one was asking if Earth could strike again. They were asking if Earth would even bother. Back home, Earth's colonies began returning to routine. No victory parades, no global speeches, just quiet rebuilding. Communications relays rebooted. Food processing centers reactivated. Mining drills restarted on lunar fields. And on every platform, military or civilian, the registry carried a tag beneath each pilot's name. Unregistered, operational, volunteer. Kolrath didn't request retirement. He didn't accept ceremony. He requested transfer. His final post was on a fringe colony near the Beltline. Nothing strategic, just a slow rotation farming outpost that needed orbital alignment tech and an extra hand keeping the supply shuttles flying. He worked in silence most days, cleaned tools, taught a few younger crew how to reset nav links when drift pushed their satellites out of path. They never asked about his medals. He never mentioned the war. One evening, during a routine orbital scan check, a comtech named Oran sat beside him on the landing platform, biting into a protein bar and wiping sweat from his forehead. I heard the stories, Oran said, glancing upward. All that mess in the sky. They say you were there. Kolrath didn't turn. Lots of people were. Oran leaned back, resting against the tool crate. Why'd they even come here, you think? All that tech, all those ships, just for lithium? Kolrath shook his head. They didn't come for resources. They came for permission. They thought Earth had none left to deny. Oran blinked. So what did we give 'em? Kolrath didn't speak right away. He stared out into the sky, where the arc of the memorial ring turned slowly. The glow reflected across the edge of the atmosphere. Ships no longer passed near it. Not by accident, not by choice. We gave them what they couldn't predict, he finally said. We didn't build a fleet. We built a scar. From the edge of the colony's scope array, a signal pinged. Neutral recognition beacon, auto-keyed by satellite proximity. Kolrath reached forward and keyed the shutdown. He didn't need another confirmation. The broadcast had already echoed. The message had already taken root. He stood, cracked his back, and nodded toward Orin. "Get some rest. Sky's quiet." The younger man grinned. "Yeah, guess it is." Colrath turned and walked back toward the storage units, passing old wire spools and grounded relay beacons. Behind him, the last rays of the sun caught the edge of Earth's orbit. And even in silence, it spoke. Not in warning, in memory. What would you have done if Earth truly had no fleet? Comment below. Hit the like button if they got what they deserved, and subscribe for more brutal HFY stories.